All right, let's try that. Can the TikTokers hear that at least now, etc.? TikTokers? Now you can hear? I'm hoping. TikTok, can you hear now or not? Yes, that's fine. I turned off all the speakers. How bizarre. Yeah, that was weird. No, it's, you know what? I actually switched back to my my good computer. Anyway, welcome TikTokers, welcome YouTubers. I switched back to my good computer for doing it. I've on YouTube, because I've got TikTok on my iPad right here, and I got the YouTubers and everything on my big computer. But for some reason, the sound isn't working. Well, it's going to be quiet because I'm a foot and a half away from the from the computer. But you're just going to have to turn up the sound, folks. Sorry about that. After I'm done, I'm going to do some tests with my mic to make sure it's working. All right, any case, guys, thank you for joining me. John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report, here to talk with you about the latest in Ukraine, the war. Big news, I think, happening in southern Ukraine, potentially in Kherson. The Russians seem to be getting a little bit worried, which is great news. Let's just get rolling. And then, guys, give it up on YouTube. We know the mic wasn't working. We're using the computer mic. I know it doesn't sound good. Let it go. All right, let's get rolling. So for questions on TikTok, you can submit questions in the Q&A function in my profile. For YouTube, submit questions at the bottom of the screen. As always on YouTube, if you want to use the Super Chat function, I appreciate that. That helps me out by supporting my work, and I will always do Super Chat questions first. And on TikTok, always appreciate your gifts as well. Your gifts help me keep going, so please keep doing that if you would. Like the October gift right there, and I will always try to call out when I see them. So thank you for that. Let's get rolling, guys. So this was very interesting. New York Times says that a Russian general, the general who's in charge of the invasion of Ukraine, Sergei Surovikin, gave an interview, a rare interview today, in which he seemed to be casting some doubt. Thank you, Baby Shoe. He seemed to be casting some doubt on how well the war effort was going for the Russians in Kherson. Now, Kherson, just to remind you all, is this province right here. So Crimea is the province in the south that the Russians stole in 2014, right? Thank you for the origami there on TikTok. Kherson is the province, the next province north. Now, Kherson is interesting because that's one where there's been a lot of success of late. If you get really close to my map, you see the town, the province is called Kherson, and the town, the main town, the capital is called Kherson as well. If you see really closely, the town of Kherson is right north of the river, okay? That's important because the Ukrainians, the free territory of Ukraine is north of there. So the Ukrainians have been coming down from the north, pushing the Russians closer and closer to the river, and obviously causing a bit of problems because as soon as the Russians get pushed back far enough, they're going to have their backs up against the river, and the Ukrainians have blown up the bridges crossing that river, so they're making it very difficult for the Russians to be able to basically escape in the end, have the Russians cornered. Well, the Ukrainians have been having great success there, slowly pushing the Russians back, and according to this general, he's admitting publicly that things aren't going great for Russians in northern Kherson. Now listen to this. So the general Sergei Surovikin, commander of the Russian invasion, said, this is from the New York Times, said on Tuesday that his army may face hard decisions about its tenuous hold over a strategically important region of Kherson just minutes after a top Moscow-appointed official there announced an evacuation of civilians from 4 occupied districts. In a video statement, Vladimir Saldo, the head of the Regional Occupation Administration, said that residents would be evacuated from 4 districts on the west side of the river. The west side of the river is basically, I would call it the north of the river, same difference, northwest. It basically means that the Russians are now getting very concerned that the city of Kherson and towns nearby are going to get cornered and surrounded by the Ukrainians, and that they're going to have to evacuate across the river, and they're already evacuating civilians. I believe they're evacuating some of the civilian administration as well, and the Russian general. Let me read a little bit more from the general. In his first public remarks since he was appointed head of the Russian military force in Ukraine on October 8th, he said that the Russian army would assist the evacuation and stressed the challenging conditions his force faces, with a tacit acknowledgement that a retreat from the city of Kherson might be necessary. Our future plans and actions regarding the city of Kherson will depend on the unfolding military tactical situation. I repeat, today it is already quite difficult. Now, the reason why the town of Kherson matters, among other reasons, is right over here, hard to see on my map, but you've got the town of Odessa. Odessa, we've all heard of, right? Famous Ukrainian town, very pretty, very important because it's the largest city here on the southern coast of Ukraine where a lot of their grain exports are happening, right? So the Russians, Putin has a goal of taking over Odessa. He hasn't succeeded in doing it yet, but he really would love to take over Odessa. Obviously, he's having problems in major fighting going here, major fighting going on here. So nobody thinks he's going to be moving over to Odessa anytime soon. But if Putin wants to eventually take Odessa, he needs to be on this side of the river, because if he's on this side of the river, then he's going across land. If he's on this side of the river, he's got sea and he's got to cross the river, which is not easy. So really important for the Ukrainian troops to be able to kick all the Russians off of the north and or west side of the river. The general also said, kind of a weird quote he gave that shows you kind of how clueless the Russians are in all of this. Listen to this. Russians and Ukrainians are one people, the general said on state television. We just want, sorry, my shirt's driving me crazy today. We just want one thing, for Ukraine to be independent of the West and NATO and be friendly to the Russian state. Well, here's the thing, okay? If Russia just wanted one thing, and of course that's two things. First, I love it. We just want one thing. Sounds like Lauren Boebert. We just want two things. For Ukraine to be independent of NATO and for it to be friendly to Russia. Well, you invaded, and guess what happened? You made Ukraine hate you, so that now Ukrainians are, record levels. They can't stand the Russians for obvious reasons. The Russians are committing a genocide. And you've pushed Ukraine into the hands of NATO, where Ukraine wanted to join NATO back in 2008, but NATO has been, not very nice about it. I mean, NATO has been difficult with Ukraine with regards to Ukraine joining NATO. Well, now that the Russians are doing this, the relationship has gotten much closer, right? A lot of military cooperation, things like that. Just really naive. And also the whole idea of Russians and Ukrainians are one people. They're not one people. And it's something the Ukrainians really bristle at. And I didn't actually get to mention this about a week ago when it came out, but the Nobel Peace Prize came out, right? And it was given to a group in Ukraine, a group in Russia, and a group in Belarus. And the Ukrainians got very upset because from their perspective, you were lumping Ukraine in with Belarus and Russia, which is exactly why Russia's fighting the war, because Russia doesn't think Ukraine has a right to exist as an independent country. Russia thinks that Ukraine is simply an appendage of Russia, and by the way, Russia wants Belarus as well. They want all the countries to be part of Russia. So when the Nobel Committee did that, the Ukrainians got really upset. So there you go. Someone explain to Kevro what's up with the microphone, please. So the Russians have launched more attacks across Ukraine today, going after the infrastructure, electricity especially, but they've also been going after the water infrastructure. Both of these are, I'm looking, my Alexa suddenly went on as I was talking to you. I'm like, I don't think I said the word. Trying to knock out even more of the power and water as winter comes. Zelensky said today that since October 10th, thank you for the burgers, Debbie. Since October 10th, 30% of Ukraine's power stations have been destroyed. I mean, 30% destroyed, not even damaged. That's pretty bad. Other bad news today, Reuters reports that the Iranians are going to be selling more drones and more surface-to-surface missiles to the Russians. The Iranians are still claiming, the Iranian government, that they're not selling anything to Russia. It's a total lie. The Ukrainians not only have pictures of the drones, but the Ukrainians even have the drones themselves. So we know the Russians are selling the equipment. Let me just look here. What else is here? Yep, according to an unnamed Western official familiar with the matter, a deal has been reached between Iran and Russia to provide surface-to-surface, short-range ballistic missiles, including Zolfaghar missiles. NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg said today that the alliance, NATO, will provide Ukraine with anti-drone air defense systems to defend itself from the Iranian-made drones. There's more ongoing drama over Elon Musk and Starlink. So last time we visited our anti-hero, Elon had just said that he was going to be paying for all of Starlink by himself. Okay, so this all went back to like a week ago when we found out two things almost simultaneously. One, that Elon Musk was having secret conversations or secret conversation with Vladimir Putin, and right after talking to Putin, Elon Musk came out with a peace proposal that was pretty much a pro-Putin peace proposal, which made a lot of people upset. We then found out that a month before, Musk had put in a secret letter to the Pentagon saying, I don't want to pay for Starlink anymore, you pay for it, or I'm just pulling the plug. Well, a lot of people got upset about that because one, Musk offered the gift to Ukraine. It's not like he didn't know how much his own product cost when he offered it to Ukraine. So for him to now say it's too expensive is a bit obnoxious because it's a gift. He knew how much the gift cost. Now, had he said, I'll give it to you for 6 months, and then if you like it, it'd be great if the government, US could pick up the tab, fair enough. He didn't say that. He said, it's my gift. Secondly, we found out that part of Starlink was being paid by, I think, the US government. Right? Secretly. We found this out a couple months ago, so it wasn't just 100% of the gift. Well, Musk gets excoriated publicly. He turns around the other night and says, okay, fine, I'm going to pay for it, and gives this kind of obnoxious tweet about how, he doesn't get any credit, everyone else is getting money, blah, blah, blah. Then, of course, yesterday, Musk starts tweeting again about how Crimea is Russian and Ukrainian should just give the Russians land because there's going to be nuclear war. And he starts going crazy in the nuclear war thing again. So what happens then? Well, Musk then, there's an article in the paper, maybe Politico, I think, that Musk is, that the US, the Pentagon is considering paying for Starlink, that they're considering just paying the fees for Musk. And Musk turns around and tweets and goes, well, it's irrelevant. I've withdrawn my request. I'm not asking any more for the Pentagon to pay for it, right? So it's like, okay, all right, fair enough. Then he tweets the next tweet. To be precise, 25,300 terminals were sent to Ukraine, but at present only 10,630 are being paid for, are paying service. So people were going, okay, so that's another 14,500 or 14,000, whatever it is, 700 that are free, but the rest are being paid. Who's paying for the rest? Is it the US government? Is it the Europeans? At the same time, a story comes out from Politico that European Union member countries are thinking of basically chipping in and paying for Starlink themselves. So it's not really clear. I'll change the resolution there on just to see for you guys. It's not really clear what's going on. The whole thing's a little bit confusing at this point, but Elon. This was interesting actually. Okay, I told you guys the other day about the Russian, actually Tajik soldiers who opened fire on the Russians in Belgorod, in Russian town right across from Ukraine, right across from Kharkiv. And we now know more of the story. Basically, some Tajik soldiers who were in the Russian army, not quite clear why they were in the Russian army. There was some talk by, I think, the guy's brother saying, the Russians drafted him and off the street, and he shouldn't have even been there. Nonetheless, this Tajik guy is there. We're getting more press reports about this from Russians, that the Tajik guy is there. He's there with two other guys from Tajikistan, and they're Muslims, okay? The Russians start talking, and this Russian officer starts talking and is telling everybody they're at a shooting range. We're practicing machine gun shooting in Russia, and the Russian officer says that we are in a holy war with Ukraine. Thank you, K9, for that. We're in a holy war with Ukraine. And the Tajik guy steps up and says, well, it's not really a holy war unless it's Muslims against Christians. It's not a holy war if it's Christians fighting other Christians. And I don't know if he said this because maybe he wasn't aware of the religion, but literally the Ukrainians and the Russians pretty much have the same religion. I mean, I'm Eastern Orthodox as well. All of our religions pretty much the same. So it's really not a holy war if you're fighting people who share your religion exactly, not just Christians, right? Well, the Russian officer, this is where it gets good. The Russian officer turns to the Tajik, who's a Muslim, and basically says something like, well, you believe in Allah, and your Allah is a coward. Now, I don't care. The religion thing kind of drives me nuts because I'm fine, people. I'm a Christian, kind of. I'm not a Muslim, but I'm not going to knock Muslims for being Muslims, and I'm not going to make fun of their God. Well, actually, in principle, we have the same God, right? Says Allah's a coward. So the Muslim, Tajik, turns to his, I guess there were other Muslims there, other Muslim troops, turns to the other Muslim troops and says, step aside. In I'm assuming the Tajik language, step aside. The other Muslims step aside, and this guy and two of his friends, according to now witnesses who were there, open fire with their machine guns on the Russian officer, kill him, and then start shooting all the other Russian troops who are there to basically take out the Russians, okay? Well, according to the reports I'm seeing now, witnesses, the Russians are claiming, I forget the number I gave you yesterday, was it 12, 11 deaths the Russians were claiming? The Russians like to lie, of course. 11 deaths. According to the witnesses, there may be as many as 33 Russian soldiers who were killed by the three Tajiks. Now, some other Russian troops arrived, started opening fire on the Tajik guys. Two of the Tajik soldiers were killed. One of them reportedly was injured but got away. But really an amazing story. Yeah, the Russians are saying 11 dead and 15 wounded, but now we're hearing 30 or 33. And knowing Russia would lie about the numbers. The Russian government would lie about the numbers anyway. Kind of amazing. And yeah, Daniel O'Neill saying going to be a lot more fragging. Fragging is what you call it when troops fire on themselves. It's not a good sign. I mean, the military folks can tell you it's not a good sign when you've got members of the same military opening fire on each other with machine guns. I mean, I shouldn't have to say that. I think it's pretty obvious. But my point is, it shows how much tension and anger there is there, between them. And frankly, that the Russian officer would turn. I mean, who the hell turns to somebody else in their unit and says, basically, your God's a coward? I mean, who the hell would say that? It's an obnoxious thing to do anyway. And frankly, it also tells you something about the Russian officer corps as well, actually, right? That an officer would even think of saying this to other members of his troop, what else we got? We got a few more stories. New York Times. Oh yeah. So remember there was video the last couple days of a Russian plane crashing into an apartment building in a Russian resort. And Russian authorities have now said, a Russian fighter bomber, Russian authorities are now saying that the death toll is up to 14. The jet crashed into the courtyard of a large apartment building. This is from the New York Times. Of a large apartment building during a training mission. 3 children were among those killed. The plane, an Su-34, which is a fighter bomber, crashed in, and I looked up how to say this, Yeysk. It sounds like I'm saying yes, but it's yeah, and it's a Yeysk. What a bizarre name, Yeysk. A port and resort town across the Sea of Azov from the Ukrainian city of Mariupol. Now, just to show you, Mariupol is here, which means this town is probably more or less around here. More or less. I mean, because this is blue, but it doesn't mean it's the sea. It just means it's not Ukraine, but more or less about here. Just really bad. I mean, the plane crashed. They're claiming it had engine trouble. Who knows? The guy parachutes out of the plane, and the plane crashes into an apartment building and burns for 3 hours. Just horrific. Brittney Griner. So Brittney Griner, you guys have asked for updates. I don't have a lot of updates, just a quick one today. Brittney Griner is the American women's basketball star who was arrested by the Russians when she was arriving in Russia in February, a week before the war broke out. She was going to Russia to play for the women's basketball team. And unfortunately, they grabbed her at the airport. I will still say it's not clear what happened because Brittney confessed a few months later to having, cannabis oil, I'm not sure what, in her bag. I think she was claiming it was medicinal. The point is, she at this point was already pretty much being held hostage by the Russians. We have no idea of knowing what actually happened. You know, you can't trust what somebody who's being held by a dictatorship is telling you that they did. She could just be trying to understandably get herself out of there, and the Russians told her, if you confess, let's face it, if you confess, it'll be better off for you, right? So we don't know what happened with Brittney. She turned 32 today. Today is her birthday, and her appeal hearing, as I thought, her appeal hearing is on October 25th. And yeah, Dave in Florida is saying Russia has a conviction rate of 97.9%. I remember it being in the 90s. Yeah. And of course, the Russians will tell you, well, they're so good at catching criminals that's why their conviction rate is almost 100%, because every criminal they catch, right, is a criminal, because this is a dictatorship. So kind of sad. Danish police have confirmed that there were, in fact, powerful explosions that took place at the Nord Stream pipeline. This is the natural gas pipeline of Russia. Two of them, actually, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. Nord Stream 1 goes back decades. Nord Stream 2 is the new pipeline, and it's the one that the Germans refused to certify and open up because of the war in Ukraine, because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Some explosions happened at these pipelines. I should say, simultaneous leaks. In the pipeline is made up of, like, Nord Stream 1 is 2 pipes, Nord Stream 2 is 2 pipes. 3 of the pipes, I believe, got leaks. I think it was 3 leaks. I think it was 3 different pipes simultaneously, which made everybody go, come on, right? Come on. They're pretty much all shut down. Nord Stream 2 never opened up, and Nord Stream 1 was shut down by the Russians because they were trying to punish the Germans to not give them any natural gas. But anyway, what the Danes found, the Danes found that, in fact, there were powerful explosions that damaged the pipelines. Nobody knows who yet, but everyone thinks it's the Russians, of course. The Estonian parliament today declared Russia a terrorist regime. The Estonian parliament condemned Russia's illegal annexation of the Ukrainian territories and voted to declare Russia a terrorist regime, saying Putin's regime, with its threats of a nuclear attack, has turned Russia into the biggest danger to peace in Europe and in the whole world. They are not incorrect. The Ukrainian Energy Agency, Energoatom, this is the actual nuclear agency, I should say, says that Russia has again kidnapped senior workers at the plant. Russia has been repeatedly going after this nuclear plant. They've been bombing it, as you know. The plant is, I think it's more, I always forget, it's either right here at this blip or this blip. Bottom line, if you look at where my finger is on the south of the river, it's either on the right or the left-hand side of my finger, but it's right here, Russian-controlled territory in Ukraine. The Russians have been bombing the plant incessantly. They've also been kidnapping workers there. They kidnapped the head of the plant the other day. They kidnapped, I think, his deputy. Now they kidnapped 2 other senior people at the plant. They kidnap them for a while, and then they give them back. It's very weird. They're up to something. They're up to something. Yes, the town is Enerhodar. My map doesn't have it on there, but I always forget if it's, I think it's all the way up at the turn in the river there, but it's more or less there. European Union, oh, this was good. European Union on Monday approved a plan to train thousands of Ukrainian troops in Europe. French Navy Admiral will oversee the 2-year, $105 million program. And ExxonMobil finally said that it has safely exited all of its Russian oil business. Exxon announced with everybody else at the beginning of the war, you know, when all the other companies were pulling out of Russia, that they were pulling out. They own, I don't think I've got it here. I do actually. They owned around a 1/3 stake in a joint oil venture with the Russians called in the Sakhalin-1 oil and gas field in the Russian Far East. Sakhalin is an island there that the Russians stole from the Japanese at the end of World War II or during World War II. Surprise. Sound familiar? I know, hard for you to believe the Russians would steal land, but yes, they did. Anthony, thank you for that. But the Exxon was trying to sell its stake to the Russians, and the Russians finally, being Russians, said, we'll just take it. So Putin just stole it and nationalized it. So Exxon finally said, we're out of here. So that's the end of the news. All right, guys, I will take your questions. You can submit your questions in the Q&A function in TikTok, go to my profile, and you all, the rest of you, you can just put them in the question box at the bottom. Of course, you can also use, which I would appreciate, the super chat feature, because that way you help support my work. I am doing this full time. This is, independent media, and literally the money I make is the money you guys give me with the super chats and the gifts and everything else. So please do. And on TikTok, same thing. I very much appreciate the gifts you guys keep giving, and I will always try to do a shout out when you give them. So thank you. All right, let me go and look for a quick, get my glasses, and I will go look at the Q&A function on TikTok. Hopefully, thank you for the hearts there. Somebody has hopefully put a question in already. One moment. Thank you. I always call those my Christmas lights. Is Ukraine able to attack Russia inside Russia? Yes. The question is whether they will get into trouble for it. Ukraine has been told by NATO not to use NATO weapons to attack. Hold on, I'm just trying to adjust my lights here. My lights are being very bad on YouTube today. Not to use NATO weapons to attack the Russian mainland. Thank you for that on TikTok. So they're able to use the NATO weapons to attack Russian troops in Russia, but not in Russia proper. What Ukraine has done otherwise is they've used their own weapons, possibly secret teams of soldiers going over, like a Navy SEAL team or that kind of a thing, but secret, what do they call it, Delta Force, whatever it is. The secret team that goes in and like got Bin Laden for the Americans. Same idea. So a secret team that goes in and has blown up, it could be drones, by the way, as well, has gone and blown up oil storage in the town of Belgorod in Russia. They've gone and blown up ammunition in the town of Belgorod. Thank you, Lisa, for that on TikTok. So the Ukrainians have been hitting within Russia. The issue is the West doesn't like it. The West doesn't like it. They think that it's antagonizing Putin and this kind of stuff. And the Ukrainians, in order to not antagonize NATO, because NATO is providing Ukraine with, obviously, a heck of a lot of stuff, they don't want to antagonize NATO, so Ukraine's been very careful. The thing is, with Russia trying to take out Ukraine's energy grid, there's a question as to whether Ukraine shouldn't go in and start doing the same thing, and they can't, but they're not. And they're not doing it, I think, because they're being, they're trying not to piss off NATO. So yes, we have the ability to, they have the ability to, but they're not too much. Put on my glasses, I can see here. Nord Stream explosions are for Russia to say they're no longer usable. Let me see here. Why don't Ukraine buy drones from Iran and use them to target Moscow? I was wondering about that. I was kind of wondering, like, basically, if Iran is saying they're neutral in all of this, the thing is, I am suspecting that, and I think I even heard this, that the sale of drones itself is a violation of the Iranian treaty, the Iranian nuclear deal. So it's not clear that Ukraine could really do it without violating, the sort of international agreement. So Ukraine may not want to do it. And frankly, America may not like it because the Americans, we don't want to see Ukraine giving money to Iran, and it's money that we gave Ukraine to buy weapons. So I agree with you, though. It's kind of a funny idea, but I don't see it happening, Margaret K., if the Republicans take over both the House and Senate, what are the chances they will curtail aid to Ukraine? Quite good, in fact. One thing that we just heard today was Kevin McCarthy, who is the Republican leader in the House. The Democrats are in control of the U.S. House of Representatives, but the top Republican is Kevin McCarthy. He would or will become Speaker if the Republicans win the House in the election in 3 weeks. It is so far expected Republicans will win the House, not the Senate, but the House. McCarthy came out and said, there's no longer going to be a free ride for aid to Ukraine if the Republicans take over the House. And what it sounds like, there's two things going on. One, McCarthy would like leverage to get some Republican things agreed to by Biden. In the U.S. system, probably may not be, I'm assuming, I don't know how it works in Europe, but in our system, generally speaking, to pass a law, the House has to pass it, the Senate has to pass it. It gets kind of complicated. They both negotiate to make the House version and the Senate version the same. So, like, they're maybe 90% the same, right? The bills. They come to a committee together, they negotiate, they make one combined bill, and then that bill goes back to the Senate and back to the House, one last vote, and then it goes to the president for his signature. That's a simple explanation, but more or less the way it works. If the Republicans take the House and Democrats have the Senate, it's going to be very difficult to get aid passed because now the Republicans can step up and say, well, we're not going to pass it unless, what? You give us more funding for the border, right? They can start to demand things they want and hold aid to Ukraine hostage. Now, one possibility around that is that during it's what's called a lame duck session, meaning if the Democrats lose the House and either keep the Senate or lose the Senate too, but if Democrats lose at least one of the bodies, it is possible, the election's November 4th, I think, first Tuesday in November, I think it's the 4th, and the elections then, let's say Democrats, oh hello, that was funny, the little dancer went off with noise, thank you for that. Let's say Democrats lose on November 4th, the House. The new House is not seated until early January. So the old House, right, you have the election, but there's the election and then there's the sort of inauguration, so to speak. In America, there's typically a couple months, like a 3-month period separating from the election to the presidential inauguration, or in this case, the election on November 4th, and a new Congress starts in early January. So you'd have 2 months basically of what is called a lame duck session, that the Democrats would still control the House and the Senate, but we would know that come early January, they would lose some of those seats because anyway. So bottom line is, what they think they might do is Democrats might try to pass like a year's worth of funding for Ukraine up front so that Biden's got the money and the Republicans then can't kill it. But, you know, I'm going to check my Q&A right now, but that's the concern, yes. And the other thing is McCarthy has got a number of, you know, kind of the more woo-woo members like Marjorie Taylor Greene, basically the Trumpers, the MAGA types, thank you for that, the MAGA types and Trump himself who don't want, they don't want to keep funding Ukraine. Trump has convinced them, and Fox News has convinced them that Ukraine is evil and that Russia is good. Oops, sorry, thank you WP for that. And Susie, appreciate it. I mean, I've got a lot of questions here in the Q&A. So would Germany react at all regarding the strike on the German embassy in Ukraine? I think it might have been the consulate, but same idea. Even if it was evacuated, not necessarily. It would have to be intentional. If the attack wasn't intentional, Germany has no reason to respond to it. You've got to remember that the U.S. hit the Chinese embassy in Belgrade, Serbia back in, what was it, 1999 or so? Remember when the Serbs were committing genocide against the Kosovars and NATO came in and bombed Serbia to stop them? And the U.S. bombers blew up the Chinese embassy and I think even killed Chinese diplomats. It was bad. I mean, it was very bad. We did not go to war with China because China was not happy, but China in the end accepted our explanation that it was a mistake. And at the same time, we offered indemnity to the families of the people we injured or killed. I seem to remember we offered a lot of money to say we're sorry. So the same thing would happen here. If Germany believes Russia's explanation that they didn't intentionally hit the German diplomatic center, then they're fine. If the Russians did it on purpose, then, you know, then the Germans should respond, although how do you respond at this point? All wars are not planned genocide. They're really not. Your opinions regarding far right are misleading and not the voice of the whole party. I don't know. Well, I'm not sure what that means. Okay, not sure what that means. Nonetheless, look, Republicans party's got some issues going on right now. You know, Trump runs the party. So I agree. Not all Republicans are bad. Not all Republicans are far right, or not even far right. I don't know what you call it with Trump. Let's face it. I mean, Trump doesn't really have an ideology. But nonetheless, he leads the party, and the party lets itself be led by Trump. And you guys have a problem, you know? So maybe a lot of good Republicans there, but they still vote for Trump, and 70% of Republicans still think the election was stolen when it wasn't. So, you know, I believe it's a certain moderator, Mikola's birthday today. I didn't know that. Oh, okay, we'll do a happy birthday for Mikola. Well, at the very least, okay, then I expect birthday streamers on, I don't know if we have birthday streamers. Well, somebody did a gift with a heart coming out, Michaela. I don't know if you're on TikTok, you can see. So, okay, happy birthday. I don't know how to pronounce your name correctly, though. Is it Michaela? I'm going to go with Michaela. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Michaela. Happy birthday to you. I actually sing better than that, but I'm singing very poorly because you put me on the spot. Oh, you're getting music, you're getting cake. We're getting lots of TikTok gifts here. That's cute. That's very sweet. You and Brittney Griner's birthday. Are you both 32? You don't have to answer. You don't have to answer that one. Oh, man. Anyway. Oh, hello, Ellen from Canada. Lovely to talk to you. Or let me I'll do a few more TikTok questions here. Could a nuclear accident in one of Ukraine's power plants be a trigger? Thank you for the lights there as well. Again, the guitar. Could the nuclear accident, oh, and make sure to follow me, by the way. I always forget to tell people to follow me. Make sure on TikTok and elsewhere that you give a follow. I appreciate it. And thank you for the gifts there. Oh, it's making more funny noises on TikTok. We're holding off on the stoves right now. I don't know. Let's see what happens with that. They just got the stoves delivered, but they need to. Excuse me. The charity has received the stoves, and now they have to actually deliver them. Actually, I should show you guys. I think I did show you this the other day. I thought it was really cool. Vlad, these are stoves that we bought. I'll show you guys first. Actually, these are stoves that we bought that are called. Oh, there's a name. You guys told me what the name was for these stoves. They're these short stoves that you put wood in. And they're, oh God, there's a name for them. Oh, okay, Roshan, thank you. Oh, Roshan, thank you very much for putting the question in there too. Okay, I've got it saved. I forget what they're, rocket stoves. Thank you, rocket stoves. Thank you, Alaska. And they are we bought a bunch, we raised money from you guys. We raised almost $9,000. The stoves cost $37 each. So we bought maybe 240 or so of the stoves. And they got the shipment of them. Vlad, Vlad's a riot. Vlad is our favorite Ukrainian, other than Zelensky, who is a Ukrainian guy I know who's been doing, helping us with all the charity work we're doing. He's actually working with the Ukrainian charities. Well, Vlad, they had the stoves made by the machinist shop. Well, Vlad got them to add my TikTok and Twitter handle and many other handles to the thing, so it's cut out. It says buy at Aravosis. If you can see, I think I showed you guys this before. It's kind of hard to read, but you get the gist. I just thought that was very cute. He told me about that, and I was like, oh God. I mean, I did think it was cute. I was like, I would have been embarrassed if it was me. I wouldn't have asked for it, but it was very cute. So that was sweet of Vlad. All right, I'm gonna see if I can adjust the light a little bit. The light keeps changing there. All right, sorry, we had a few questions here on TikTok, including one that I missed. All right, one moment. So the missed super chat is from Fred Hofeld. Sorry, Fred. Do you think America will ever declare Russia a terrorist state? My guess is that Biden is holding off. Thank you. Thank you for the heart there. My guess is Biden is holding off because of Brittney Griner and Paul Whelan, by the way, who's the other American hostage being held by the Russians. I think he's trying not to piss off the Russians. That's my guess. That's my guess. And I mean, there are going to be legal reasons as well, right? I mean, Biden would have been, briefed that whether it's appropriate and all of this. And I mean, and I think Biden would be somebody who, if the lawyers told him, it doesn't really fit in this situation, he wouldn't want to do it. Also, I think Biden has been very concerned. I am less concerned, but Biden has been very concerned about putting Putin in a corner. And I wonder whether Biden would worry that it would, again, you'd risk putting Putin in too much of a corner by doing that, right? By declaring it a terrorist state. So I think those are the various reasons we haven't done it. That's just my guess on it. All right, I got the Iran thing. Hang on. Yep, terrorist state we just did. I got Fred's. Does the new Lend-Lease Act, don't ask me, Craig, I may not be up on this. allow Biden to bypass some of the nonsense from a Republican majority House. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. The thing is, the Lend-Lease is intended to let him sort of, I believe, get around Congress and get around some of the legislative details and things like that around Congress. I'm sorry, Congress and the bureaucratic stuff with the administration as well. So Lend-Lease would, yeah. Actually, my guess is, and again, I'm not an expert on the Lend-Lease thing, my guess would be that they're going to give Biden a lot of money up front for Ukraine, and a lot of money up front, and try to tie it through the Lend-Lease so that it's clear this is money he can spend. It's money that he doesn't have to go through reporting, whatever it is that has to be done. But yeah, my suspicion is that'll be tied in with whatever they do if, in fact, Democrats lose the House. But currently, looks like it. Update on Belarus. Yep, actually, you know what? Let me go back. Daniel, let me do yours in one quick second. I want to do another TikTok because people are right. We don't, sometimes the TikTokers get ignored. Don't mean to, guys. Oh, this is what I was going to say. Could a nuclear accident in one of Ukraine's power plants be a trigger for NATO to join the war in Ukraine? Yes. What the concern is, here's the thing. Nuclear explosions don't really happen. I mean, Daniel, I'm going to pull yours up. I'll get to yours next. Nuclear explosions are complicated things, meaning like a nuclear bomb going off. So you don't have a nuclear explosion just because a bomb happens to have some nuclear material with it. That's called a dirty bomb, by the way. It wouldn't be, so you have a bomb, plastic explosive, whatever, and somebody puts some plutonium with it and ties it all together. The bomb goes off, you wouldn't have a nuclear explosion. You would have a regular explosion, but the plutonium might be pulverized, and you've now got plutonium thrown in the air, and it can then travel in the wind and cause all sorts of problems, right? So the same thing can happen with a nuclear plant. A nuclear plant gets blown up by the Russians on purpose, most likely, in some way or shape or form, and potentially you could have nuclear material go up in the air. That's not likely unless the Russians use a nuclear bomb to attack a nuclear plant, which is kind of crazy, but they might, because nuclear plants are made quite literally to stop a 747 jet from blowing it up. So the thinking is it would be very hard for Russia to blow up a nuclear plant. Thank you, Niels, for the hat. It would be very hard for the Russians to actually blow up a nuclear plant using a bomb. They could blow it up with a nuclear bomb, which means then, but I mean, well, no, you'd have the nuclear bomb, and then you'd also have the plutonium or whatever it is, uranium, whatever, in the plant itself that would then get thrown in the air, right? The other more likely concern people have is that is a meltdown. Exactly. Me and you, Ukraine, has just said it on TikTok. Is a meltdown. That the Russians keep attacking the vicinity of this nuclear plant in southern Ukraine. And including yesterday, they knocked out the power to the plant, and the plant had to go on its backup generators. The backup generators are run by diesel fuel. And you've got the legitimate concern that if the power goes out and you're on the backup generators, what happens if the backup generators go out? What happens if the Republican, I don't know why Russia, I'm always thinking R, and R for me, I say Republican. The Russian attack on the nuclear plant ends up taking out the backup generators too. Like they drop a big enough bomb and it takes out the backup generators. Well, now you don't have any coolant running at the plant and you have a nuclear meltdown. The fuel rods themselves get so overheated without the cold water. I mean, I'm not a nuclear expert, but I know this in general. Without the cold water running and keeping the rods cool, they overheat and boom, you have a meltdown. It literally melts down. The whole thing melts. The containment can melt. It goes into the earth. It can hit the water bed underneath, send out radioactive steam. I mean, horrific what can happen. Now, that can all right, good, John, glad to hear that. That could then affect neighboring countries. You've got a lot of neighboring countries NATO countries, right? You've got Turkey down here. You've got Romania over here. You've got, I always forget, Slovakia. You've got Slovakia over here. You've got Hungary. You've got Poland. All NATO countries. Well, if there's a nuclear meltdown at this plant because the Russians cause it, and it ends up going over to NATO territory, that is potentially an act of war. Yeah. But the question becomes, it's not as if there's a computer that decides to go to war, right? It would have to be a NATO decision as what does, if this nuclear radiation in the air, we know the Russians did it, and it comes over and goes over Poland, for example, what do? Is it an act of war? Well, NATO would meet and they would decide, is it an act of war? But then they'd have to decide, what do we actually do, right, in response to this? And I don't know. So I don't know whether, when you say NATO getting into the war, it gets complicated what that means. But I think absolutely if this were to, there's two things. One, if the radiation were to come to a NATO country, we would have to be more involved than we are now. The second thing becomes, what if the Russians just cause a meltdown at this plant and the radiation doesn't go to a neighboring country? I still think we would have to react much stronger because Russia is using nuclear plants as a terror device, and that's something that you've got to set the lesson for the world that we don't allow that. It's too dangerous of a precedent for Russia to establish. Okay, Danielle, any update on Belarus? Are they foolish enough to invade? Their training looks like a scene from the movie American Ninja 4, which I don't know. The Belarusians are training with the Russians right now. There was talk of the Russians possibly moving 9,000 troops in. There's really no news on it. Nobody knows. I was reading this again today. One thought was that the Russians come into to Belarus. Actually, let me show you on the map again, just so folks know. So you got Ukraine, you got the capital Kyiv, you got, I believe this is a river, or it's just the border with Belarus. Either way, Belarus is up here, Russia is over here, okay? So Belarus is here, dictatorship run by a good friend to Putin, and the Belarusians have been causing a lot of trouble. They let the Russians invade from there, and there have been concerned that maybe they're planning to launch an attack on the Ukrainians. Hard to say. Well, the thought is that the Belarusians still might not want to, oops, I always hate that when it kind of messes my light. The Belarusians may not want to invade Ukraine because they can't afford it. They can't, not only is their military not good enough, okay, to be able to attack Ukraine and survive, but they have to be very careful because he's a dictator. And he's got to keep troops at home to stop himself from getting overthrown. So Lukashenko probably can't afford to move his men in. I was reading something today saying that from Ukraine's perspective, it could be risky if the Russians decide to invade with their 9,000 troops or more via Belarus. That could be a problem because then the Ukrainians have got to move even more men up to the north and northwest, rather than the main places they're fighting. Now, keep in mind, the fronts in the war overall are, around here, like following my finger more or less are the main fronts of the war, okay? So all the way like over here. That is not over here where Belarus is. Just the discussion of will Belarus invade is forcing the Ukrainians to keep troops up here just in case. So that's part of the reason the Russians and the Belarusians are doing this, is just to cause trouble for the Ukrainians. Thank you for the train there. Was that James Bond, I believe it said? I've got to see the name really quick. Hold on. Oh, James Boudreaux. I thought it was James Bond. I was like, James Bond? That's kind of cool. Thank you, James. So they're trying to make the Ukrainians basically waste men and move them up there, just in case. But it was saying that, yeah, if the Russians were to invade, it could be a problem because the problem is it's just not clear the Russians have got the troops to invade. They don't have enough men. right? The fact that they're taking men off the street in Moscow and going into subway stops and like literally at the subway station accosting men and going, show us your papers, you're drafted. That means they don't have enough qualified men. I just don't see how they can afford to open another front in the north when they're not doing very well in the south and the east. You know, so that's my sense. All right, make sure I didn't miss anything here, and then I will jump back to TikTok again. I don't think so. I don't think so. Okay, let me know if I missed anything on there, and I will jump back to TikTok. Thank you for the Borg glasses, as I call them. Yeah, right. The draftees get 2 days of training if they're lucky. If Ukraine manages to take all of their territories back, would Ukraine stay on the defensive, or would they try to possibly make small pushes into Russia? Nah, they're not going to make pushes into Russia. I mean, because the thing is, look, Russian nuclear policy would kick in if Ukraine were to take over part of Russia. Then, you know, then the Russians might actually use their nukes for that, right? You also have the problem of NATO has made clear, the US has made clear that we really don't want the Ukrainians moving into Russia and taking Russian land. So my suspicion is that's just not going to happen. Because look, you know, the Ukrainians need us and they need NATO. And so far we've had a very good, you know, mutually beneficial relationship. So I don't think so. I don't see it happening. No. And you also set yourself up for just more wars. You know, I mean, now, not that somebody doesn't think. I did have a Harvey question I got to, I thought, didn't I? Maybe not. I thought I got to a Harvey question. Let me know if I didn't. So yeah, that's my sense. I don't see the Ukrainians doing it. Don't see them doing it. Thank you, Debbie, for that. But, oh no, I didn't get to Harvey's. Hold on, Harvey. There it is. It just popped up. Sorry, that was new. I didn't see it. Thoughts on UK Prime Minister Liz Truss? Jeremy Hunt is actually in charge. I don't know who Jeremy Hunt is. And her unstable government. This is the new British Prime Minister when Boris Johnson was forced out. Does the unstable nature of UK politics currently be taken advantage of by Russia? And if so, how? You know, I mean, okay, here's the only thing. And this, maybe you'd have to tell me this. If I were Russia, right, certainly the Russians are hoping that the Republicans win the congressional elections. In the Senate, in America, in the Senate, I don't think it would matter. In the House, it could matter because Donald Trump is super pro-Russia and super anti-Ukraine. And as we're already hearing from the possible new Republican leader in the House, he's going to be very difficult about passing budgets because his people don't want to vote on him. His people don't want to support Ukraine. They're MAGA people. So if I were Putin, thank you, Stephen, for that. If I were Putin, and I could somehow delay things until or let me phrase this, hold out long enough for Republicans to, you know, take over the Congress, that would be great, right? And I'm guessing like the same thing with you guys. If I were Putin, I'd be holding out for something bad to happen and maybe a government that's not as friendly to Ukraine steps in. I don't know that it changes Putin's calculus, however, right? I mean, I'm not sure Putin would do any, even for America. I'm not sure he'd do anything differently, right? Would he? So I don't see that happening. I mean, the thing is, her government has been very pro-Ukraine. My question to you is there any possible British government, I mean, possible meaning probable British government that could come to power that would not be as good on Ukraine? I'm just not sure that's true. I mean, Labour, but Jeremy Corbyn, right? But he's not around, is he? So that's the thing. Now, having said that, it's kind of like the natural gas stuff too. You know, Putin is holding out for something to change. He's holding out for energy to become so bad, energy prices and the probably just the lack of energy in Europe over the winter to break resolve. He's hoping American Congress breaks resolve. He's hoping Liz Truss's government falls apart and breaks resolve. But that if he can hold on just long enough, even if he's not winning, even if he's slowly losing to Ukraine, if he can hold on long enough, Europe or America will finally say, okay, we can't do this anymore. We're just going to have to cave. We're going to have to, you know, free your sanctions and go for it, right? So that's my take, Havikins. Debbie, thank you for that. Let me look. Let me grab another TikTok, and then we can probably shortly. I'll do a quick summation. I don't know. I don't know. It's a good question. Somebody's asking, what do you think the urgency of the talks are between Ben Wallace and the White House? Ben Wallace is the British Defense Secretary who came to America today for meetings, and I don't know what it's about, though. I just have no idea. I mean, obviously I have no idea, but I don't even have a guess as to what it would be. Now, it's possible, you know, who knows? Maybe we're finally, maybe we're finally considering giving Ukraine the longer range rockets that we wanted. So I keep doing this to adjust my light. It's not helping. The longer range rockets that we want to give them, right? Maybe that's what's going on. I don't know. I don't know. Do you think Putin has an end goal? Meaning if he reaches a certain point, he'll call it a win. The problem with that is that it's not up to Putin. And what I mean by that is some people said, you know, Putin should have called it a win. They should have, you know, just invaded here, taken the 2 provinces in the east, which he wanted. He already had Crimea in the south that he'd stolen a while ago. Should have just taken these 2 provinces and called it a win and called it a day, right? The problem is Putin can't just call it a day. The Ukrainians have to call it a day too, otherwise the war keeps going. So Putin right now could say, you know what? We've got these 4 provinces, it's done, war's over. Well, Ukraine's not going to stop fighting, right? I mean, Ukraine's going to keep fighting to get its land back. So I just don't know to what degree that matters. That even if Putin had smaller expectations and said, okay, we won, you know, the only thing that might have mattered, the only thing that might have mattered is had he used all of his troops like in the east and only invaded to take those 2 provinces in the east. In other words, only invaded to go up to here rather than all of this. Because now he's having to defend all of this. If he only had to defend this, it might have been a hell of a lot easier because he would have had 200,000 men to defend a small area rather than a large area. And that is easier to take over, it's easier to defend, and maybe the Ukrainians wouldn't have been able to fight back as much, you know? So let me just see real quick. People were saying on Ben Wallace, Brexit's a disaster. Respect for Ben Wallace. He turned down the job of prime minister so he could focus on supporting Ukraine. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's nice. That's nice. All right, let me do a quick recap, folks, for you. We like to do that at the end of the show. Beep, beep, beep. There we go. All right, quick review of the news. Thank you for joining us. I will do the recap, and do make sure to follow me, please. I would appreciate it on TikTok and YouTube and elsewhere. So, New York Times said that the commander in charge of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, General Surovikin, said on Tuesday that his army may face hard decisions in northern Kherson, which is the southern region where a lot of the fighting has been going on, where the Ukrainians have been doing very well getting the land back. And it sounds as if the Russians are telegraphing that they may have a very hard time holding on to the strategic area in northern Kherson, north and west of the river, which is great. He went on to say Russians and Ukrainians are one people, and he wished for just one thing, which is actually 2 things, that Ukraine be independent of the West and NATO, and it's friendly to Russia. Well, got news for you. You kind of killed that possibility by invading them and committing genocide. Russia launched attacks across Ukraine against energy and water infrastructure today. Reuters says that Iran is planning on selling more drones to Russia, including also more surface-to-surface missiles. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said today that the alliance will provide Ukraine with anti-drone air defense systems. Elon Musk made things more confusing again, saying that he was withdrawing his request for the Pentagon to pay for the Starlink system, and now it looks like EU member countries are offering to pay, so it's not clear what's going on. As many as 33 Russian soldiers were killed when a fellow Tajik troop member opened fire on them at a training ground when they decided to not very smartly attack Allah and called him a coward. And the Muslim Tajik and his 2 Muslim friends opened fire and killed as many as 33 of the Russians who were being really, really rude. Brittney Griner turned 32 today. Her appeal hearing is October 25th. That might be next Monday-ish, I think. Danish police confirmed that powerful explosions were to blame for the damage to the Nord Stream pipeline. Having said that, it's not clear if it was, Russia or who did it, but it was powerful explosions. The Estonian parliament has declared Russia to be a terrorist regime. What else have I got here? A few more stories. The Russians have again kidnapped even more staffers at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. The European Union approved a plan to train thousands of Ukrainian troops in Europe over a 2-year period. Thank you, Ellie, for the crown. And ExxonMobil has finally safely exited Russia. They were trying to sell their stake in a Russian oil venture out on Sakhalin Island. The Russians refused to buy it and simply stole it from them, which is what Russia does. All right, guys, we are at 7:03. I am calling it quits. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for the gifts. I appreciate it. Thank you for the follow. Please follow me on TikTok and beyond. And I will be back tomorrow, Wednesday, same time, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you, Bonnie. We haven't had those in a while. 6 p.m. Eastern time, US. We'll be hanging out. You can find out more information on me, actually, and ways you can get involved via my link tree, which is a whole series of links. You can find it typing in my last name, aravosis.com. So just aravosis.com. You can see my name on TikTok and elsewhere. And it'll take it all the way. My Patreon is there. My Discord, discord.aravosis.com. I've got a store set up with really cool kind of Ukrainian t-shirts. And half the money from Ukraine goes to our humanitarian work that we're funding in Ukraine. Forgetting what else. Oh, my LinkedIn, if you want to see who I am a little more closely. Anyway, go to aravosis.com. You can check that out. Thank you for joining us, guys. And I'll go a little bit to the Discord tonight. We'll go a little bit. I don't want to go too long because I don't want to keep, since I did this morning, I did a little hangout on TikTok, so I don't want to stress my voice too much today, but let's hang out for a few minutes over on Discord. That's discord.aravosis.com. And when you get to the Discord, go to the left column, go all the way down, look for the voice channels, and the very top one is John's After Party, I believe we call it. Yes, I saw the Tajik president yelling at Putin the other day too. Actually, that's a good point, tying that all together. Yeah, that is a good point. Thank you, moderators. You're amazing. I know it's not fun. I'll just go for a few minutes, Rob, to Discord, and then I'll sign off. Yeah, so be careful with the voice. All right, guys. All right, thank you, guys. Everybody, I will see you tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, US. All righty? All right. Bye-bye. And you.